my intention in this keynote and in my workshop tomorrow is to provide some tools to help you be even more effective than you already are. Given the importance of your missions, we all need to be as resource abundant as possible. You're doing great work in Jewish communities, and there's nothing more important for you to be focusing on. And how do we just let that blossom even more than it's been blossoming already? My first job as a development professional started out great. In many ways, it was my dream job. You see, I basically begged my way into having this job because I was in a sales job selling something I wasn't particularly committed to. And at the same time, I was volunteering for an organization called Results, which is about creating the political will to end hunger. And I found ending hunger work was much more inspiring and compelling than the things that I was selling. So I got the job. It took a lot of persistence, but I got it and I loved it. And at first it went fantastic. But then it started to not be so great. One day, my boss came to me. I was behind in my goal. I needed to raise $40,000 by the end of the goal. There were going to have to be cutbacks if I didn't raise my goal. Who were we going to let go? What would happen if I couldn't raise that money? So I went to my go-to donor, a wonderful gentleman who gave very generously to Results. I asked him for $10,000. And he said no. He and his wife had recently given. I know this says something about my inexperience. I was new as a development professional, but I went to the one person I knew was probably a yes. I got off the phone and I did what no development professional is supposed to do. I burst into tears. I cried. I went back to my boss and I said, if you're going to have cutbacks, maybe we should cut back me. I don't know that I'm up for this much pressure. Well, she very kindly came back to me and she said, I want you to call Lynn Twist. Lynn is the author of a book, The Soul of Money. And by the way, in this talk, I'm going to mention a few different resources. Don't worry about writing them down. All of them will be put in the chat at the end. But Lynn Twist was a friend of hers, and she suggested I call Lynn and ask her to come and present and train our team at Results. And in fact, she did. So I learned all sorts of different things, like about scarcity, for example, that Winnie was referring to. And by the way, I forgot to mention both Winnie and Dirk. Thank you so much for those stories. Those were great. So I learned about scarcity and about these different mindset and these different ideas. But there came a very pivotal moment in the presentation and in her work. And I raised my hand and I said, I just learned about somebody who got $1 million donor. We should have $1 million donor. And Lynn, being Lynn, said, are you willing to take a stand for $1 million donor, Laurie? And I thought, my God, okay, let's backpedal. I can't even raise $40,000. How could I possibly do that? And she said, here's the thing. If you take a stand and put it out there that you're committed to getting $1 million donor, you're essentially throwing your hat over the fence. This metaphor means if you throw your hat over the fence, you got to crawl over the fence and go get it. So she had me listening. And then she said, another thing is you should get yourself a committed listener, somebody who says, yeah, you can do it. You're not crazy. This is possible. So I went off and I did that. And I found my friend Peter. Peter was totally optimistic, great guy. And we would run together periodically. He was a funder of Results. And I knew that he would be somebody who would support and give me a good cheer, and help me think it out. Every time we'd meet, we would strategize. And admittedly, we kept thinking, who's going to be that one person who comes and saves us that we didn't even know? Again, a little misguided. But what happened was, over time, I could see that we were getting so excited about what this would mean for Results. I saw this greater possibility of, imagine if we had $1 million, we wouldn't be worrying about who to cut back. Think of the legislation we could push through that would help people to survive chronic hunger. What a difference that would make. So one day when I was running with Peter, I saw that he was totally lit up and excited. And I was like, what? Did you find that person? And he looked at me and he said, Laurie, I'm your $1 million donor. I was floored. I had no idea that he had that capacity. That was a pivotal event in my life, and I took away a number of different lessons. One was throw your hat over the fence, take a stand, put it out there, make a declaration that you can do it. Secondly, get yourself a committed listener, someone who believes in you. The other things, though, that I learned was that I have the ability to enroll somebody in a greater possibility for a cause. I also saw that I could enroll myself in something bigger, that actually my own mindset had been in the way. Here I had thought that I couldn't raise $40,000. How could I possibly raise $1 million? That mindset was critical. I had this conversation in my head that I can't do this. The economy is bad. Nobody believes we can end hunger. Who's going to want to throw their money into it? In Lynn's book, as it's been mentioned, she talks about scarcity, the great lie. This is when I really got to see something that Lynn was talking about in real time. It was because of this stand for $1 million donor, something magically began to be present to me. I began to see the impact of scarcity mindset everywhere I looked. I noticed when I heard people say, I could never, or we tried that before, or we just don't have the time. Why would they listen to me? There's so many times that I heard it throughout the organization and even in day-to-day life. So just so that I know that we're on the same page, I would like you to take a moment and write down an example, or maybe a couple of examples, where you see scarcity thinking within your organization. And when you have an idea, I'm going to ask that you put it right into the chat so we can see it. So what's an example of scarcity thinking or scarcity language? And if it's not from your current organization, maybe it's one that you volunteered with some prior time. So let's see, if you would, any ideas you have about examples of scarcity thinking? If we ask people to give us legacy gift, they won't make an annual gift. I realize I need my glasses for this. That never worked in the past. Yes, we don't have enough staff to cover that. We've tried with them before. I'm too young and don't have anything. You got it. I bet we could fill this chat for a long time. So I hope that you see that scarcity thinking is a huge killer of fundraising possibility. This is perfect. So I hope you see that when you start to look for it, it's like that fish in a dirty fish bowl that doesn't even know that the water's dirty because he's so in it. But once we start to look for it, we can start to see it everywhere. I eventually left my job in results, and I continued to see the impact of scarcity mindset everywhere. I got to work with so many great organizations, like many of you in this room. We're all committed to these great causes and great organizations, yet so many organizations are not as effective as they could be in terms of their fundraising. I saw that mindset was a key piece of what needed to be changed. So I started to look for some tools that worked on this idea of addressing the mindset. I found wonderful resources in trainings on how to put structures in place, like purchasing and implementing a good database or a stewardship calendar or a moves management program. And there were wonderful resources and trainings on behaviors, like how do I ask, or how do I create a development committee, or how do I write a good donor newsletter? There were no nonprofit resources about how to make an organizational shift in mindset. Because I couldn't find the tools that I was looking for, more than 20 years ago now, I made it my life purpose to address all three parts of an organization: the structures, the behaviors, and the mindset. I started my own consulting company and started to learn alongside clients who wanted to challenge a mindset of scarcity. Thankfully, I was able to find a really great resource, and I'm going to show it to you now. This is Robert Gass's, he's part of an organization called the Social Transformation Project. This is the Wheel of Change. And I want you to know that the hearts and minds here is essentially the mindset. But he put it together as a model, which had me see that what I'd been advocating for and teaching was about culture change. You see, if your organization hires a development professional, right? That's a behavior. You hire a development professional. But if everyone, say the board, has this huge sigh of relief, phew, at last somebody's going to handle development, that evil necessity, it's not going to turn out very good, right? If you buy a fundraising data, but there's no organizational capacity to get training on it, it's going to be a waste of money and it's not going to turn out well. So again, you make a decision to get a database, right? That's a structure, but there's no money to get somebody to learn how to work with a database. It's not any good. And in fact, if you have any persistent annoyance that's in the way of fundraising success for your organization, it's likely that there's some sort of scarcity mindset blocking its way. I want to say that twice. If you have any persistent annoyance that's in the way of fundraising success in your organization, it's likely that there's some sort of scarcity mindset that's blocking its way and it's not going to turn out well. You're going to find yourself in the cycle of having the same challenges over and over again. In fact, scarcity thinking or a scarcity mindset is the major block to a culture of philanthropy. Now, I know that I haven't described what I mean by a culture of philanthropy. Just give me a couple of seconds. We're going to be there. About 12 years ago, I was given the honor of leading a course for development professionals through the Harold Grinspoon Foundation's program for overnight and day camps, J Camp 180. The course was called GIFT, and it was about teaching development professionals how they could make culture change in order to build a culture of philanthropy. All right. Culture of philanthropy. What does that mean? There are a lot of different definitions that I've heard, and very often it looks something like this, where one person's rowing in one direction and one's rowing in another direction. So I'm pretty committed to us. If you've ever seen a boat like this, it just goes in circles, right? So I'm committed to us having us go in the same direction and have the same thing in our mind. So let's think about it. What do we mean by the word philanthropy? Well, very often, I know those of us who have been doing this work with Arlene and with Life and Legacy, you might not all come up with this as the first stab of what we mean by philanthropy, but very often people think about the richest 1%. And while the richest 1% are welcome to the Culture of Philanthropy party, absolutely, they're not the only game in town. If you spend your time looking for that elusive rich individual, you're likely not taking care of the community around your organization and their multitude of gifts. And I promise you, you have an abundance of resources surrounding your organization already. So let's look at that group, right? Can you imagine somebody from your wish list in this crowd? Is there a savior on your list that you have in mind that you might be focusing too much on instead of taking care of all the people that are already part of your organization? So instead of that definition of philanthropy, I prefer the gender neutral root of philanthropy, love of humankind. So that's the gender neutral root of philanthropy. So anytime I say the word philanthropy, I'm talking about the love of humankind, and I'm referring to all of the generosity that truly exists in abundance. So what do we mean by culture? Let's take a look at that, right? So culture is kind of complex. We've already started talking about it. I want to have us use that as a frame, right? These three pieces. In the for-profit world, culture has been a key tool that organizations have been using for a while now. And just remember that we can't easily see it. It's impossible when you're in that fishbowl and you need to be able to step back and reflect. Again, you got to step back. So let's look at this definition. I'll read it out loud to you. A culture of philanthropy exists when organization-wide attitudes, actions, and structures. So just like the wheel of change, right? That's the hearts and minds, the behaviors and the structures. Reflect an understanding, respect, and responsibility for philanthropy's role in the success of your organization. This commitment is reflected in the mission and reinforced through continuous engagement of all stakeholders. While you've seen the definition of a culture of philanthropy, what it really ends up being is this. When you authentically engage your donors, they'll want to give more. When you show your funders the deep impact they're making with great stewardship, they'll want to stick around. When you recognize and appreciate the vast array of gifts that volunteers and donors bring to your organization, you'll find an abundance of resources that you couldn't even imagine. So I noticed while I was teaching the gift program for JCamp 180 that development directors were having difficulty moving forward with their desired culture change. They try to put together a major donor program, but the executive director would tell them that they need to ask now. It's the end of the year. There's no time for donor engagement. Or they wouldn't get the database they need to track donor relationships and partnership. Or they'd invite board members to help with development, and there would be radio silence, crickets. Their board members were not involved. A few years ago, the Evelyn and Walter Haas Jr. Fund partnered with Compass Point, and they produced the Underdeveloped Report. You may have heard of it. The report found that development directors are leaving their jobs on average after 18 months. Most plan to leave their job in the next 2 years. Their boards are disengaged. Many executive directors are not sitting at the chief table or in a leadership role, so they don't know what's happening programmatically. And their donor retention rates, the rates that the donors come back and give again a second year, were abysmal. The glimmer of light at the end of the report that was missing, that they said, this is what's missing, was a culture of philanthropy. I was so excited to see validation for our work. However, I also saw something that was missing from the gift program. They were trying to do it all alone. I had a huge breakthrough. I saw that having one person, a development director, doing it all alone was useless. They needed to have a team of people who were all committed to the same thing. I had the gift program evolve into the Gift Leadership Institute, and instead of teaching one person, it required a team. After years of doing this, this is what we've learned. That in order to build a culture of philanthropy or make any culture change for that matter, you must have a team of people. It must be the top leaders, the top staff leaders and board leaders, development and program staff at the very least. Marketing is great to have there too. They have to come together and build a plan. Their task is to unpack what scarcity exists in the current culture and then create the desired change. So it takes absolutely being committed and patient. As Winnie said, culture change takes time, but it's worth it. So I invite you to get a team. Seriously, do this. Get a team together and take the Culture of Philanthropy assessment. It helps you to see where you do well in your culture of philanthropy and where you could do better. It'll be the beginning of a journey to strengthen your organization and its impact in the world. At the end of this talk, there'll be a URL with our assessment tool. And again, it's best if you do it as a team. And lastly, I want to leave you with a bold leadership challenge. Where can you step up and throw your hat over the fence in order to build a culture of philanthropy? It may mean that you take a stand for a bold financial goal, or that you take a stand to have a major donor program or a more effective legacy program, or to step up your leadership on your board for you to do that yourself, or simply to take on, we will learn how to do this. We will learn how to build a culture of philanthropy through reading and implementing what you learn in Choose Abundance. What is your metaphorical hat over the fence? Again, I want a little bit of reflection time. Take a minute right now and jot down an idea or two. And when you get one that you like, by the way, you don't have to commit to it. It can just be a dream goal that you could imagine going on sometime in the future. please put it into the chat. So once again, take a moment. What might be something that you could take a stand for? And please put it into the chat. Be bold. I'm going to move on so that hopefully you'll put some things in there. I want to complete this in time. So I want to say this. Over 15 years ago, I met Diane Trotterman, Harold's wife, and she was a donor to an organization that I worked with. In that meeting, she suggested I meet Harold. And a few weeks later, I did. In that conversation, Harold, I'm looking at you and I can remember this as I'm telling this to you. Harold asked me some questions. You said to me, Harold, how many of the organizations that you consult are led by Jews? And I said, just about all of them. And you asked me, how many of the doctors that you've known over the years were Jews? Pretty much all of them. And you said, how many of the teachers? And I said, quite a few. And then, Harold, you leaned into me and you said this, Laurie, those nonprofit leaders, doctors, and teachers were once kids that went to camp, and that's where they learned their Jewish values. We've been working with these camps that are part of my foundation, and they're doing amazing work. Everybody can hear Harold go, they're doing amazing work, but they don't know how important it is. They don't believe that they're worthy of funding to be able to fulfill their mission. Their mindset is all off. I knew in a moment that this was a place that I wanted to consult organizations that were making a special difference in the world. And I wanted to work with this foundation because of Harold's commitment to addressing mindset change. So, Diane, thank you for the introduction to Harold. And Harold, thank you for the opportunity to spread the word of building a culture of philanthropy. You are all doing great work in your communities. I ask that you take on throwing your hat over the fence in one way or another. I'd love to hear how. And that you build a team to build a culture of philanthropy plan. I'll be talking more about what's involved in my workshop tomorrow. The workshop's called Starting Your Journey to Abundance. It's at 12:30. And so now I want to thank Arlene, Kate, Tammy, all the team for your important work with this community, and for all of you for your commitment to Tikkun Olam, to heal the world. Thank you so much.